Hello, everybody.
Hello.
I'm Marilyn Bradford, and I'm joined with Pam Houghteling for this edition of the Irreverent Therapists. So here we go. This is called, the title for today is If I Can't Articulate.
Let's see if either of us can talk today, actually.
Are you the Lone Ranger? Are you the Lone Ranger? Do you pull yourself up by your bootstraps like John Wayne? Is asking for help and assistance an admission of failure? What if there's another possibility? What if you were willing to receive all that the universe and others had to offer? There we go.
I'm going to say that's me in a nutshell until sometime fairly recently. How did you describe me so well, Marilyn?
I know you pretty well.
And just to share with our viewers, so I'm someone, as a teenager, I was depressed, anxious, suicidal, requiring, I was high maintenance as a kid, let me say it that way. And then when I was 23, I had an accident and, had a back injury and was quite impaired with that for several years. And I came on the other end of all of that, I came out with what I call my fierce independence. And that's, I can do it myself. I don't need any help, and there's about zero vulnerability in that stance. There's not a lot of choice, right? Because it's just like, I'm never going to be that needy again, is a pretty fixed point of view. And of course, I've chipped away at all this for a long time. But Marilyn, I'm going to say it's like the last month when, in Access Consciousness classes, we started talking about and clearing things about autonomy, that I really started to change this. And it's been quite different.
Well, say more. Say a little bit about autonomy.
Yeah, no,
people know what that is.
I can. Well, so the way we're using it in these classes is autonomy. Well, it's totally matches my fierce independence. It's where you want to be in control of everything. And so it requires you to separate. For me to be that fiercely independent, I really am separate from everybody.
Yeah.
And the thing that I can talk about that's the most kind of up in my universe is I know a lot of people who love horses, have horses, ride their horses all the time. And here, right now I'm in El Lugar, which is a resort in Costa Rica, and there's tons of horses. And I'm someone who rode horses when I was young and had a fall and didn't get back on the horse. And so I've had this thing about being around all these people and horses where I'm like, I should really get over my stuff. And if I was being conscious, I'd get over my stuff and everything. Of course, is not being conscious by having that judgment of myself.
Yeah.
And with this starting to clear all this stuff about the fierce independence and actually being vulnerable, I chose to go on a horseback ride yesterday, which I haven't chosen that in a long time. And I was with the horse. It wasn't me independent, got to control everything. Don't want to be on the horse because, I'm not in control. It is because it's so big, which is all a point of view. But, other times I'd ridden, it was me isolated and the horse isolated and me kind of, anything could go wrong, probably will, which is a really joyful place to ride a horse from, I have to say. And instead, yesterday, it was, I was with the horse. Nice. One of my friends had said, let the horse know you have its back. And you allow it to have your back and you ride together. And what I would say is when I was doing my fierce independence, I wasn't capable of that. And yesterday I was. I couldn't actually allow it. Yeah. And you might be like, oh, well, what's, yeah, riding a horse, whatever. But one of our friends says all the time, like everything you need to know in life, you can learn from a horse. Like I never got that before yesterday. And I'm like, oh, I can actually start to see this door opening. And, but I mean, like, I can't even be with myself when I'm doing that fierce independence, right?
Exactly.
It's like separation from everything because you're like a little island.
Yes. No, that last line, I can't even be with myself if I'm fiercely independent, because I think a lot of us are going through a very similar thing. And one of the things that I allowed to change for me, it's a little bit hard to describe, but I used to take so much of my worth from what other people saw me or said about me, their feedback. And something just went, and I was like, this a few weeks ago, you know what? I'm awesome. And
yes, you are.
And I don't really care what other people think about me or how they treat me or anything like that.
Yeah.
But what came with that, Pam, is the willingness to be more vulnerable.
Yes.
Because by knowing I'm awesome, it doesn't mean I'm great at everything. It means I'm awesome.
Well, and the awesomeness doesn't have anything to do with anyone or anything going on around you. It's you.
It's me. It's me. But that allowed me to acknowledge my talents and abilities, and also to acknowledge the places where, you know what, I'm not so good at that. But being able to be more aware of that rather than I've got it all together, I know how to handle everything, not working out quite the way I thought it would, but but anyway.
Yeah. Well, and I'm thinking, I mean, because we know people all over the world and might have people from other parts of the world than where we live on the show. If you don't know the Lone Ranger, because that's it's an American TV show. Actually, I don't know if it was a TV show or a movie or both, but it's a character. The Lone Ranger was, it's back in the Western days where, everybody was riding horses around, and he was by himself. And he was this Lone Ranger, and he'd go around saving people and saving the day. And and he had a mask.
Was his name Tonto? Am I getting that right?
Tonto was was his sidekick.
Oh, okay.
So maybe he wasn't completely alone. I have to say, if I watched it, it was when I was really little, but but it's like something in our culture in America that we all, in the United States, that everybody's like knows the Lone Ranger. But if you think about it, a masked man, like nobody knows who he is. You can't know him. He's separate. He swoops in when needed, but doesn't need anybody, and doesn't, that's kind of when you say, are you a Lone Ranger, it refers to all of that.
Yes.
And so, where have you been functioning, as though, one, you can't even let anybody know you. You can't let anybody in. You can't be vulnerable. And you have to save the day all the time.
Right. And you have to, and that save the day, it's kind of like being perfect.
Yes.
It's like there shouldn't be anything that you can't do. There shouldn't be anything you can't know. I remember Dr. Dane here, who's one of the creators of Access, talks about when he was 4 years old, he panicked. He was in his house and he was panicked because he couldn't figure out how to drive a car from one place to another. He couldn't figure out distance. Not that he was driving it for, but distance, I should know everything.
Yeah.
And that's part of being the autonomy, being the Lone Ranger, not allowing. And when we think, I don't know, it's so weird. When we think of asking for help, it tends to make a lot of people feel like, oh, I'm incompetent. I'm a victim. Which isn't true at all, because once you really acknowledge you're you're going to acknowledge there are places and spaces where it would be great to have some assistance.
Yeah. Well, I so remember, because Marilyn and I over the years have often traveled on the same planes to get to different classes and things that we were going to. And honestly, I can't remember, Marilyn, maybe we're like 10 years apart in age, something like that. And we got on a plane and you were asking someone to help you put your bag up.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh God, my fierce independence. Because, of course I can do it myself. I'll even help you with yours. But I can remember talking to you about it. And it was basically like my unwillingness to need help.
Yes.
Meant I actually couldn't even receive like just generous help that somebody wants to offer me because they're being kind. Right.
Yes. Yeah.
And I just remember that incident and starting then to be like, well, what if I actually could receive that generosity of spirit that people have? And because if I'm having to be fiercely independent, that means I don't need anything, but also then I don't need you to do anything for me. So, which is, again, a very isolated way of being in the world.
Yes, very isolated. And that brought up something else. And I'm going to refer to another time when we were flying together and you later talked to me about it. It not only means you have to do it all yourself, it cuts you off from other possibilities.
Yes.
I remember once we were traveling somewhere, maybe even Australia, I can't remember, but somewhere international. And we were in economy. And I said to the stewardess or whatever I can't even remember what they're called, the flight attendant, is it possible to get one of those things they're having up there in first class? Eventually I got it. And you're like, you can do that?
You can do that?
You can ask. You may or may not get it, but you can always ask.
Yeah. Well, for example, like with me and horses, I mean, will I become someone who rides all the time? Doesn't matter. Like,
yes.
But there's not a block to it.
Yes.
Now I have the choice. It's not this like internal monologue about, well, do I, don't I, do I have stuff to get over? Because I didn't say this. What I realized is I was always trying to figure out, how do I solve my horse problem? There is no problem. And I was using one of the tools that Marilyn and I use all the time called interesting point of view.
Yes.
And I was just like, interesting point of view. I have this point of view about riding a horse. Interesting point of view. And the whole time I was writing, if anything came up, interesting point of view. And I was like, there's no problem. There's just the choice in the moment and how I choose to be in the moment with the horse and with me and with everything. And that's something you can use anytime, anywhere, any situation.
Yes. Well, and the other tool that I like a lot is just asking the question. If I ask, well, two things. One is if I ask this person or if I ask whomever for assistance, what does that create? We just lost Pam. Sometimes she just walks out. It's so weird. Just joking. And I'll get a sense of the energy. Or if I ask this person to do this, what will my life be like in 5 years? If I ask this person to do this or to contribute, and if I ask them to contribute in this way, what will that create? And what will my life be like in 5 years? And that is following the energy, asking a question and then following the energy. That's actually very self-empowering rather than fiercely independent is actually not self-empowering.
Yeah.
So that's something that came about.
Sorry, I disappeared. There was a knock at the door.
I figured a lot of people wonder,
Yeah. So I lost the train. Sorry.
That's all right. I was just talking about how asking a question really leads to contribution. And the other thing is not limiting what and who can contribute to you. The earth is happy to contribute to you. Well, like the horse contributing to Pam, and Pam, that's the gifting and receiving. but I notice my furniture is happy to contribute to me. My kitty is in his own way. He'll come and present himself to be petted. But that's a contribution. It really is. It's being with a being. And it's not doing that separate kind of me against the world.
Well, and we've been talking about, when you isolate yourself, when you're trying to do it all yourself, what can you actually receive, and kind of isolated. Kind of the flip side of that, or a different possibility, is we have a friend who has about 18 different businesses. Now, he could not do that if he was being fiercely independent.
Right.
He has so many people who are contributing to his life and living and businesses, and they receive from everything he's creating, and they contribute to everything he's creating. And so you can actually create a much greater, richer world for you, for your life and living, the people around you, when you're willing to not be the Lone Ranger and actually include you and include other people and receive from all of it. So I'm sure that my fierce independence is not completely gone, but I am definitely doing what I can to melt away as much of it as possible.
That's awesome. Me too. I when you said that about the person with all the businesses, I thought of a facilitator who's a fabulous facilitator and extremely creative. But she did say at one point, it was a while back, she said, I really love creating by myself. It's so much funner. But I've also realized that I can create so much more when I invite other people to create with me.
Yeah.
And that's the thing.
That's awesome. And I think that's a great note to end on.
I do too. Thank you all.
The music.
Go forth and receive contribution.